It's been more than 4 years since violence at a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, shocked the nation and left one woman dead. The trial is set to get underway today with opening arguments in the federal civil case against the organizers of the Unite the Right rally. NBC News national security correspondent Ken Dilanian joins us now from Charlottesville, Virginia. Ken, good morning. So first, tell us who exactly is on trial here, what is it for, and what's the defense saying?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, the people on trial here are sort of a who's who of the neo-Nazi, racist, alt-right movement in the United States. Thankfully, they're not household names, although some people may have heard of Richard Spencer. He's one of the defendants here. And this case is really about the line between speech and violence. We all know that the man who drove his car into a crowd of people at that two-day rally 4 years ago, and killed a woman, he's serving life in prison. A few other people were prosecuted. This case seeks to hold a larger group of people accountable, including those who organized that rally and protest, and who the plaintiffs say were planning violence all along, that they meant for violence to happen. They brought weapons. The plaintiffs have terabytes of evidence, including chats on a platform called Discord, where some of the people who organized this rally were talking about their intention to, quote, crack skulls and to drive vehicles into crowds. And so this is an attempt by a group of people who say they were injured that day to hold these people financially accountable, to, in some cases, bankrupt some of these far-right organizations to make them pay a penalty, Savannah.
Now, Ken, this happened more than 4 years ago. So what's happened so far in this case?
Yeah, this has been a pretty slow-moving civil trial. It took 3 days, for example, to seat a jury in this case. The big thing that happened was in 2018 when the judge ruled that the case could go forward, that a plausible legal claim had been made. But there's been a lot of twists and turns, in part because there are so many defendants. Some of these defendants have been fired by their lawyers because they weren't cooperating. Some of them have disappeared, in fact. And this case has imposed a financial cost on some of these far-right organizations even before the trial. Some of them have dissolved. Richard Spencer, who I mentioned, called this a financially crippling lawsuit. So it's already had an effect, Savannah.
All right, Ken Dilanian, thank you so much.
Coronavirus cases are going down in the United States, but in Russia, they're going back into a COVID lockdown. The country is now reporting more new daily COVID cases than during any other time in the pandemic. This surge is forcing the government to tell people to stay home for the next 10 days. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner joins us now from Moscow. So, Matt, first of all, tell us just how bad is this new surge in cases there?
Joe, good morning. Well, we saw two record-breaking numbers this morning that really underscore why this is happening. The first is the daily case growth. Today, for the very first time, surpassing 40,000 new cases. And also, sadly, the daily fatality rate also record-setting today with about 1,159 reported for yesterday. So all of this is really underscoring how serious the situation is here and basically why this is happening now.
So, Matt, Russia was the first country in the world to authorize a COVID vaccine with what's known as Sputnik V back in August of 2020. Two questions for you here. First, how are the vaccinations going? And second, help us understand just how effective is the Sputnik vaccine? Maybe a lot of people were scratching their heads about it because it was approved so quickly. So is it any good?
Sure. Well, so I guess just to start with the efficacy, Sputnik basically, every time it's gone up for international review, international scientific scrutiny, has been vindicated by those studies. We'll see a lot of wild numbers kind of thrown out from the backers of Sputnik here, ranging from 82% effective to 93 or even 97. They also insist that it's better than the Western mRNA vaccines. But really, when you look at the international studies, it falls somewhere behind Pfizer and Moderna, but ahead of AstraZeneca. But I think you can look at a lot of different studies here. So there's really, I think, internationally not really a lot of legitimate concern about its safety, but vaccine skepticism here in Russia is rampant. The vast majority of the population still refusing to take the shot. I think the latest update we got on complete vaccination was about 33% of the population. It's been around 30% for a while. There was a big, of course, over the summer when Delta arrived, it also came to Russia, and there was a lot of concern about rising cases over the summer. And the government then launched another vaccination campaign, tried some other measures to coax people, to convince them into getting vaccinated. But back then, back in July and August, that number was just around 30%. So it's obvious that the vaccination messaging effort is basically a failure. We're hearing that word thrown around a lot by supporters of the vaccine here, basically by business owners who are very upset about this lockdown, about having to return to this state. So I think the Kremlin at this point is basically trying to figure out how to deal with this. There were reports this morning that they're using this week to kind of prep a more aggressive messaging effort. That has been denied. So it seems like a lot is in the air now on what their next move is. But there's also, I think, a growing interesting trend where that 30% who has been vaccinated are getting increasingly frustrated with the 70% who have not, especially, again, as we're returning into this lockdown now.
All right, Matt Bodner. Matt, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Raf Sanchez is with us today from Tel Aviv. Hey, Raf.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. India has test-fired a new intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead more than 3,000 miles. India is bolstering its missile capacity in response to advances made by China. The two massive Asian nations have been locked in tensions over their border and other issues. Hong Kong has passed a new movie censorship law. China's government says the bill will protect national security, but critics warn it's going to smother the territory's vibrant film industry. And it's the latest in a whole series of measures closing down space for free expression in Hong Kong. And finally, New Zealand says it will slowly open its ironclad COVID border policies. New Zealand has had some of the strictest pandemic controls anywhere in the world. The new rules will make it easier for its own citizens to return home. But guys, don't book your tickets just yet. It's going to be months at the earliest before tourists are going to be allowed in.
All right, they have been very cautious so
Yeah,
far,
they
but it
certainly
has
have.
worked, I guess.
Yeah,
All right.
hopefully nobody was planning to go there.
Yeah, exactly.
anytime
I don't
soon.
think so. Raf, thanks.
All right, and coming up, a major milestone marked in the pages of American passports.
Up next, NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeva joins us with more on a new gender designation being recognized in the U.S. and what it means for so many Americans. You're watching Morning News now. Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, disturbing details in that deadly movie set shooting involving actor and producer Alec Baldwin. As hundreds of rounds of ammunition, some of them possibly live, are discovered on the set. Now, authorities are saying criminal charges are still on the table.
I think there was some complacency on this set, and I think there are some safety issues that need to be addressed by the industry.
What we're learning about the moments leading up to the shooting that killed the movie's cinematographer and what the investigation could mean for the future of filmmaking. Race against the clock. President Biden bound for Europe as Democrats make one final push to pass his agenda. How the outcome of 11th hour talks on Capitol Hill could set the tone for the president on the world stage. Opening arguments set to begin this morning in a civil trial over the deadly 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. We're outside the courtroom this morning with what to expect in the case. And the countdown is on. Less than 100 days to the 2022 Winter Olympics. We'll take you to Beijing with a behind-the-scenes look. Plus, more on the challenges organizers are facing before the games begin. It's hard to believe it's almost time again.
Yeah, it seems like the Summer Olympics were just this last summer.
Yeah. Good one. It's exciting, though. Remember when they were over and we were like, we needed those stories.
And I'm a Winter Olympics fan because
Yeah.
I'm from Minnesota. So.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Well, it's very exciting. We'll get to that a little bit later, but we begin with new developments this morning in the investigation into that deadly shooting on the set of the movie involving Alec Baldwin.
Authorities say that criminal charges are still possible in the case. The district attorney told NBC News Now last night that corners were cut on the set. Investigators are interviewing crew members who inspected or handled the gun that fired the fatal shot. Here's the Santa Fe County Sheriff.
Well, I think the facts are clear. A weapon was handed to Mr. Baldwin. The weapon is functional and fired a live round, killing Ms. Hutchins and injuring Mr. Souza.
The sheriff said police collected 3 firearms and about 500 rounds of ammunition on set. That includes blanks and some that may be live rounds.
According to a search warrant affidavit, the film's assistant director, David Halls, told authorities he should have checked the gun more thoroughly. Halls announced the gun was safe to use, before handing it to Baldwin.
Joining us now with the very latest on this is MSNBC anchor Yasmin Vasugian. She's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We also have NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos here to help us understand where this case stands. Yasmin, let's start with you. During this news conference, did we learn anything else about the events leading up to the shooting, or if someone could be criminally charged?
We did a couple of things. We learned some things obviously still in question here. First and foremost is a live round killed Halyna Hutchins. That was the headline coming out of the press conference as of yesterday. Some questions still stand, though. Why were there live rounds on the set of the film Rust? And also, on top of that, you know, it's the question of culpability. Who should be held responsible for what took place? Two people handled that firearm before it made it to Alec Baldwin. There's Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. She is the armorer, 24 years old. This is only her second job as head armorer. She said she checked for hot rounds before they broke for lunch. Once they returned from lunch, that's when rehearsals began, and that's when the tragedy took place. And Halyna Hutchins was, in fact, killed. Then Dave Halls comes into the picture. Dave Halls, the assistant director, he was actually fired from a movie set back in 2019 because of the mishandling of firearms. He said, and I quote in his statement during this affidavit, I want to read this. I checked the barrel for obstructions. Most of the time, there's no live fire. She, Hannah, opens the hatch and spins the drum, and I say cold gun on set. We know, Joe, that he did, in fact, call out cold gun on the set before handing that gun over to Alec Baldwin, which means this thing is safe. That's movie term for this thing is safe. He went on in this affidavit. David advised when Hannah showed him the firearm before continuing rehearsal, he could only remember seeing 3 rounds. He advised he should have checked all of them, but did not, and couldn't recall if she spun the drum. One other thing that stood out to me, guys, is the fact that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed in this affidavit was asked, are there ever live rounds on a movie set? She said, absolutely not. Well, we now know a live round, in fact, killed Halyna Hutchins. On top of that, 500 rounds of ammunition were recovered from the set by investigators, now being tested at Quantico. And the sheriff yesterday saying, in fact, he believes some of those rounds were live lethal rounds. So then there's the question of whether or not charges will be filed, criminal and or civil. I know Danny Cevallos is going to be getting into this a little bit more with a little bit more detail, but we heard from the district attorney yesterday. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
All options are on the table at this point. I'm not commenting on charges, whether they will be filed or not, or on whom. So the answer is we cannot answer that question yet until we complete a more thorough investigation.
It's going to be a long, drawn-out investigation, possibly weeks, if not months, to deduce what they should do moving forward. They got 90 witnesses they have to interview, look at their testimony as well. 500 rounds of ammunition, once again, having to be tested to figure out what they should do to move forward, guys. So this is still very much an open, active investigation as we begin to piece things together.
Yasmin, you talk about those interviews that are going to need to be taking place as this investigation unfolds. Do we know anything from Hannah directly? Has she been interviewed? Will she be interviewed?
So, yes, she was interviewed in that affidavit that I mentioned, and she talked about what led up to the shooting. Again, she said that she checked for hot rounds in the firearm before they broke for lunch, and then that firearm was subsequently placed in a prop truck. They then got the firearm out of the prop truck and brought it over to a cart in which 3 guns were placed on a cart. And then Dave Halls, the assistant director, pulled one of those guns from the cart and handed it over to Alec Baldwin. And she mentioned, and I think it's important that I continue to reiterate this, that on movie sets, there are never live lethal rounds. And subsequently, investigators found what they believe to be live lethal rounds on set that are being tested at Quantico. And they found a live lethal shell casing in Joel Souza's shoulder after he was shot and injured on set following the death, of course, of the cinematographer.
All right. Yasmin, thank you so much. Now let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, obviously there are a lot of outstanding legal questions here. The big one, of course, being, could Alec Baldwin get charged with anything here? So the Santa Fe district attorney says she hasn't ruled anything out. She spoke to our own Tom Yamas last night. Actually, first I want to play a little bit of that sound.
He's very important. He's the one that pulled the trigger. He's the one that was holding the gun. And so he's very important. Does that mean that charges will be filed? Not necessarily. It also doesn't mean that they won't be filed.
So what exactly do you make of that statement?
what the DA and the sheriff were doing in their press conference is playing their cards very close to their vest. They did not want to commit to anything. So is it possible Alec Baldwin could be charged? Yes, it's possible. I don't believe it's likely. And he may not, he's more likely to be charged as a supervisor than as the person who actually pulled the trigger, because the paradox, the bizarre thing about a movie set is it may be the one place in America where we say somebody handed a firearm isn't expected to know that it's dangerous. Nowhere else in America can a defendant in a criminal case argue, well, yes, I had a gun, but I didn't know guns were dangerous. They might argue I didn't know it was loaded, but an actor on a movie set is there to act. It's safe to say that other people have superior responsibility to the actor, including the armorer, the first assistant director. Those are folks that have overlapping circles of safety responsibilities for a firearm on set.
I mean, the district attorney says there's really no precedent to follow here, certainly in New Mexico. She emphasized you need to show willful disregard for the safety of others in order to be charged with involuntary manslaughter. So tell us more. What is that willful disregard? How do you determine that in an investigation like this?
We have a very confusing thing in American law. We have criminal negligence and regular civil negligence. Civil negligence is an objective standard. It asks a simple question, irrespective of what was in your mind, your soul, your heart. Is what you did something that fell below a standard of care? Whereas recklessness adds a second component. Yes, what you did fell below the standard of care, but were you consciously, knowingly disregarding a risk when you did it? And that is a much harder standard to meet in criminal cases like this, where you have someone who was just obviously, well, possibly obviously negligent. It may be a bigger step to get to criminal negligence because that requires the reckless standard.
All right, wow, really just some mind-boggling stuff that there were these live rounds even there, potentially more as they've investigated the set. Danny Cevallos, it's great to have you on this set with us.
So happy to be here on set with you folks. It's great. It's great to be back.
More of you here with us. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
President Biden kicks off his trip to Europe today ahead of two crucial global summits, major meetings aimed at tackling climate change and strengthening the world's economy. This trip comes as the fate of his own domestic agenda hangs in the balance. President Biden heads to Rome first for this weekend's G20 summit before going to Glasgow, Scotland for the COP26 climate change conference. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now, along with foreign correspondent Claudia Lavanga, who is in Rome. Good morning to both of you. So, Monica, we want to start with some breaking news. We're hearing President Biden will announce a new social spending framework that's expected to win the support of Democrats. He's expected to meet House Democrats this morning before heading to Rome. This is really a last-ditch effort to push through his infrastructure plan. What can you tell us about these new developments?
Key word there, Joe, in what you just said, expected to win support from all Democrats. Of course, they had been divided over the details over these last few weeks of negotiations, but it does appear that the president will at least lay out what he thinks his party has now been able to get behind later this morning before departing for Italy and for Scotland. Notably, before that, he's scheduled to go to Capitol Hill to meet with House Democrats and again try to hammer out a path forward. So it's unlikely that there's going to be anything necessarily introduced today as a deal, all done, signed, sealed, delivered. That will happen much later. But at least the president, we understand from even a White House official, is going to come out and talk about the new framework. So essentially reveal to the American people what stays and what goes. We know many of these thorny issues had really been debated up until late last night. So we'll get the latest update from the president before he does leave, when he was hoping to tout progress on the world stage when it comes to these major economic and climate summits. So we'll have to see what he actually is going to take as a deliverable once he is wheels up for Europe.
We should note the president expected to address the nation around 11:30 a.m. Eastern today. Claudio, I want to bring you in. President Biden will also meet with the Pope. That's tomorrow. He's becoming only the second Catholic president in history to do so. Of course, JFK the first. But this visit comes as the president faces pressure at home from conservative bishops over the issue of abortion rights. So what can we expect from their meeting?
Well, that's right, Joe. Well, if you think about it, Pope Francis is going to be the first leader, world leader, that Joe Biden is going to meet tomorrow morning before he meets other world leaders who will attend the G20. And he's also the only world leader whose picture Joe Biden has in his Oval Office. Why? Because he shares many views with Pope Francis, especially when it comes to climate change, which will be very important. It will be discussed probably tomorrow morning when the two meet, poverty, on how to tackle poverty and how to tackle immigration. But as you mentioned, they have another thing in common. Well, they are both being attacked, if you may call it like that, by conservative bishops in America, in the U.S. Why, as you mentioned recently, some conservative bishops in America, and they've called for politicians who support abortion, like President Biden and as well Nancy Pelosi, to be given or to be refused communion during Mass. This has, of course, created a lot of divisions, not only within the bishops, the College of Bishops in the United States, but also here within the Vatican. Now, Pope Francis has spoken about that. He told us, journalists who were traveling back from Central Europe in September, that he thinks that that particular issue, on that particular issue, bishops, of course, including the American bishops, should really be pastoral and not political. So there will be many things that they'll be talking about tomorrow, some of which they do agree, like the ones that I mentioned earlier, and some of which they do not agree, like, for instance, abortion and same-sex marriage, even though it has to be said that President Biden said that he personally opposes abortion, but he cannot impose his views as an elected leader. Joe?
All right, speaking of meetings, Monica, tomorrow also brings the first face-to-face meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron after the U.S. and Britain announced that nuclear submarine deal with Australia. It's a deal that sidelined France, causing a major rift between the two countries. Could this meeting be an opportunity to perhaps mend some of those ties?
Yeah.
Certainly, Joe. This was a very large diplomatic dust-up, one that France very audibly said they felt cut out and really left behind, and really wanted some kind of an acknowledgement from the United States and from President Biden that that was the case. Remember, the two leaders did speak in the week or so after that deal was negotiated between Australia, the U.S., and the U.K., and the White House did concede that they could have done a better job of giving France a heads-up, essentially, that this was coming, but that the two leaders hope to have a very productive and friendly meeting when they do meet, of course, later tomorrow in Rome on the sidelines of the G20 summit. So we do expect there to be some fence mending and for the two leaders to talk about that very important relationship. And then also we've learned Vice President Harris will be traveling to Paris, France next month to continue to strengthen that relationship in that effort, given how complicated those talks were over the summer and given the fact that the U.S. is still saying, of course, France is our oldest ally, and they want to maintain how important that relationship is.
All right, Monica and Claudio, thanks so much for your reporting this morning. Appreciate it.
Now, in Washington, Democrats had been working feverishly to reach this agreement on the president's Build Back Better spending package. We're expecting to hear from the president today that deal may have been reached. Multiple sources have confirmed that family and medical paid leave, a key priority for progressives, is being dropped from the bill in an effort to win the support of moderate Senator Joe Manchin. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. Leanne, good morning. So we now have this expectation that Biden will announce that a deal has been struck that has all Democrats on board. Walk us through where we're at with this revised package and how it potentially is getting all Democrats on board despite these changes.
Yeah, Savannah, there's not a lot of details yet on what President Biden is going to say, except for the fact that he is expected to announce a package that has the support of all Democrats. Now, we don't know what the details are. As you mentioned, we learned late last night that this critical issue for Democrats, paid family leave, has likely been dropped from the bill because of opposition from Senator Joe Manchin. There was also lots of questions about a Medicare vouchers for dental provisions, also Medicaid expansion as well, and also how to pay for it. So it's going to be really big news if President Biden can go into that meeting today and say that he has an agreement with Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, and something that the progressives and the moderates can all get behind. Because the reality is that is what these progressives need to hear today. They need a commitment from the president that he has the support of all Democrats if they are going to give any votes for this bipartisan infrastructure bill that Speaker Pelosi wants to pass today. Remember, those two different pieces of legislation are linked. And so this is hopefully going to give confidence to those progressives that they can vote for it.
All right, Leanne, lots to watch for this morning, especially as we expect to hear from the president a little bit later on. Thank you so much.
The battle against the COVID pandemic has sparked a battle over vaccine mandates. Now a judge says she will not stop a vaccine requirement from going into effect for the nation's largest police force. Overnight, a New York City judge ruled the NYPD and city workers still have to get at least their first dose by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or else they'll be put on unpaid leave. Police union filed a lawsuit seeking to have the mandate declared illegal. A judge will hear that lawsuit in 2 weeks. In the meantime, the mandate will stay in place. New York City is now preparing for a potential staffing shortage once it goes into effect. The vaccine might be available to millions of younger children as early as next week. The FDA could authorize the Pfizer vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11 in the coming days, though there are signs many parents may not rush to get their kids vaccinated right away. Health officials are pushing for more vaccinations as we head into the winter months and as cases drop to their lowest level since the spring. They hope to keep that momentum going. Let's bring in Dr. Bob Lahita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and director of the Institute of Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health. Dr. Bob, good to have you with us. Let's talk about vaccine mandates. So how do you convince someone who doesn't want to be forced to get the COVID vaccine that the shot is worth getting?
Well, particularly, Joe, for police officers, firemen, EMTs. They are first-line people, literally first-line people, because when you get sick and dial 911, they're the people who are on the scene. And frankly, it's very difficult to know who is seropositive for, or rather infective with COVID-19 and non-infective. So when you pull up to a scene, you go in and you see the person in bed who is febrile and vomiting perhaps and with aches and pains, and you don't know what that is. So we mask up, you put goggles on, you wear a suit, you go in and you say, my gosh, what am I up against? So I have always been in favor for these first-line people to be vaccinated. It stands to common sense to protect yourself and your family. So there is, as you know, 60 police officers have died in New York City of COVID, and 16 firemen have died of COVID. So it is important that all of them be vaccinated. And they're expecting, as you mentioned early on, a 20% deficit in both fire and police and EMS, for that matter. And the union, Joe, is arguing about bodily integrity. So saying, yes, bodily integrity is important, but it's also important to protect you and your families.
Let's talk about younger kids who could soon get vaccinated. There are parents who are still going to be reluctant to give their kids the shot. One parent told NBC News, quote, there would need to be information out there to convince us it was necessary first, and that they're, quote, uncomfortable with how quickly it's rolling out such a small study. What would you say to that parent who's saying something that really many parents might also think?
Well, first of all, about 35% of parents are interested in having their children vaccinated. There's about another 35% or 30% or so who are on the fence. And then there's the never vaccinate my kids group. But, you know, it's important to say that for the holidays, Thanksgiving, and indeed Christmas, children should be protected. You're going to have them with family members who may or may not be infected. You'll have them with family members who are all vaccinated except for Junior, for, you know, the grandchild or somebody's child who is not vaccinated. So it stands to reason that a child should be protected. First of all, for the holidays, and secondly, to prevent them from having that rare syndrome of multi-system inflammatory disease, which is quite deadly in young children. And then lastly, schools and school teachers. School teachers and ancillary people are all vaccinated, but the kids are not. And even if the child doesn't have any symptoms, he or she is still capable of transmitting the infection.
Dr. Lahita, quickly on this last one, pregnant women have been encouraged to get the vaccine, but new research shows pregnant and breastfeeding women are slower to respond to vaccination once they get it. Should they be concerned about their level of protection?
Yes, they should, Joe. I have advocated that pregnant women and breastfeeding women should be vaccinated. Why? Because pregnancy is a special state. It's a state in which your immune system doesn't kick in right away because you're carrying a fetus which shares the foreign nature of your husband or your mate. And so the immune system is not up to par. After the second shot, it is up to par. So they're slow to respond, but very, very important to protect both mother and fetus.
All right. Dr. Bob Lahita, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Severe storms with tornadoes and high winds rolled across eastern Texas into Louisiana on Wednesday, leaving dozens of homes damaged and tens of thousands without power.
NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with the latest. Of course, hey, Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, what a day yesterday, in cleanup in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, still at this hour, 350,000 people without power. And how about those tornadoes down in Texas yesterday morning? I mean, these were like up close and personal Texas. This one kind of looks like your average tornado, and then all of a sudden it gets really intense. It hits like a barn there and a grove of trees, and things just start flying everywhere. These winds were estimated to be about 120 miles per hour. It was a very narrow and intense tornado. No injuries, no fatalities, but yeah. That was dangerous as it gets. And there were 8 tornadoes yesterday. Here's some damage pictures from another one. This one comes from Brett Adler. This is Mauriceville, Texas. This one was approximately what they consider an EF2, maybe even an EF3. And you can notice the roof of that home just tore apart. A lot of lives were changed yesterday as those tornadoes rolled through sections of Texas. So we could do more today. We're still tracking that storm system through the Gulf Coast. We had some overnight strong storms in the panhandle of Florida. Today we're watching that severe weather threat from Tampa to Orlando northwards. Right now, no severe storms, just some strong thunderstorms with some heavy rain. And as we go throughout this evening, we will watch additional storms. I-95 from Wilmington to Charleston to Savannah to Jacksonville, Florida. Then that I-4 corridor from Orlando to Tampa. We'll be watching you carefully. So today's forecast, possible travel delays, Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis, kind of a cold rain moving through the Midwest. And then as the weekend rolls around, we're going to watch a rainy day tomorrow on your getaway day from D.C. to Baltimore, Philly in the late afternoon and evening, Cleveland, you're included in this mess too. And then the Northeast, you get another soaking rain on Saturday. It's not going to be damaging wind or anything like the last storm, but it's just going to be a crummy kind of Saturday. And then your Halloween forecast, cobwebs included. We will be watching pretty nice weather coast to coast, just a little bit of snow for our friends in Wyoming and Nebraska. But after this crazy weather we've had over the last 10 days, I think we all could use a nice treat on Halloween.
Absolutely.
Love a holiday weekend forecast. Thanks, Bill. See you in a bit.
Okay, guys.
Coming up, a civil trial in Virginia now getting national attention.
Yeah, after the break here on Morning News Now, our Ken Delanian joins us from Charlottesville, where opening arguments are set to begin 3 years after that deadly white nationalist rally. Stick with us.
Trick-or-treaters will have to scratch 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue off their Halloween route this year. That's because the White House announced it will not be hosting a Halloween event this year. President Biden and the First Lady will, of course, instead be in Rome for the G20 summit, which takes place this weekend. The sight of trick-or-treaters walking the south lawn of the White House has become something of a tradition since President Obama began hosting the event. After taking office back in 2009, the annual festivities continued while President Trump was in office. But for this year's Halloween, the White House will be lit up in an orange light to celebrate the holiday. Well, the president is away. I was wondering if, they do that thing. There was always that person in your neighborhood who left out a bucket that just said, please take one. And then that lasted
take one,
30
the honor
seconds.
System. Yeah, outside the White House. Maybe a really big bucket from them. No, it makes me kind of sad that there's not going to be one. I'm surprised somebody can't just step in for the president and then have the kids. It's so
Someone
cute
else can
seeing
open the
them
door,
there.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. I guess Rome's pretty cool, though. Thanks, Joe. Now, the U.S. has issued its first passport with an X gender designation for Americans who do not exclusively identify as male or female. For more, we're joined by NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeba. Good morning, Joe. So the State Department didn't say who got the passport, citing privacy concerns, but you've actually confirmed it went to Navy veteran Dana Zim after a 6-year legal battle. Tell us how this happened.
Sure. So yes, Zim originally filed their complaint in 2015, and they confirmed they just received their passport in an envelope, and they said it brought tears to their eyes. They added, quote, "It took six years, but to have an accurate passport, one that doesn't force me to identify as male or female, but recognizes I am neither, is liberating." So this is a huge win for them.
The State Department expects to be able to offer the X designation to more people soon. Do we know when that could be or how that process might work?
They expect to offer it to people starting in the new year. It's unclear exactly what that rollout will look like, if they'll start with different parts of the country first, but that's what we know for right now.
So now let's talk about something that might make this a little complicated. Laws regulating gender marker changes on an ID, they vary by state. So what will this mean for people who eventually have an X marker on their passport but live in a state that doesn't allow for that to happen on their other IDs?
Right. Yeah. So 20 states and D.C. currently allow for X markers on IDs, which means that in the remaining states, someone might be able to get an X marker on their passport, but it could conflict with their state ID, such as a driver's license. And it's unclear what kinds of issues that could cause for folks. So people have been saying, you know, this is really a historic moment, but there are definitely still issues to work out in the future.
All right, Joe, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Enraged parents in Loudoun County, Virginia, are calling on members of the school board and the superintendent to resign after 2 sexual assaults in the school district. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck reports on how the investigation into those attacks is spilling over into the state's hotly contested race for governor.
You failed. You failed. You failed. You failed. In Loudoun County, Virginia, parents reach a boiling point. Once again, school board members facing the heat.
Resign or be removed.
Many parents demanding new leadership after they say a sexual assault at a county school was covered up by administrators to advance a transgender bathroom policy.
All of you must go, and we will take back our schools.
A judge finding this week a 14-year-old male student guilty on 2 counts of sexual assault. Officials saying he wore a skirt, entered a girl's bathroom, and assaulted a 15-year-old female student back in May. He was later accused of assaulting another student at another school in October. School leaders say they notified authorities of both allegations immediately, though at a June meeting, the superintendent saying this.
Do we have assaults in our bathrooms or our locker rooms?
To my knowledge, we don't have any records of assaults occurring in our restrooms.
Angry parents calling that a lie after the release of an internal email sent from the superintendent to school board members in May, notifying them of the incident. Ian Pryor has 2 children attending Loudoun schools.
They knew that this controversial bathroom policy that they were trying to pass would get derailed if that news got out.
The superintendent recently apologized, saying he wrongly interpreted the question and does not believe there was any intent to deceive. Students walking out in protest saying they did not feel safe in school. It's the latest example of this divided district turning into a culture war battleground. Other issues including mask mandates and critical race theory.
Critical race theory, in fact, pits Black people against white people.
Can we get a motion to remove masks?
But some in the school community say the voices at board meetings don't speak for the majority of parents, and that some may be trying to sway the governor's race. Catrice Nolan ran for a school board seat and says she faced online harassment.
How would you describe what's going on?
I would describe it as created chaos. I think it's been created.
One Loudoun teacher saying while there should be accountability on the assaults, she questions the timing.
It all came about all at once and then exploded when all of the election's so close.
Virginia candidates now putting education center stage. Republican Glenn Youngkin.
In Loudoun County today, we have a school board that is clearly guilty of gross negligence.
President Obama stumping for Democrat Terry McAuliffe.
We don't have time to be wasting on these phony, trumped-up culture wars. This fake outrage.
Do you think this is a politically motivated minority?
What I've seen is that parents, they go out there, they're fired up, they're defending their kids.
Political experts say the fiery topics are galvanizing Republicans.
Loudoun is a perfect proving ground for what Republicans hope to do in 2022. They need to capture the suburbs again.
The proof comes in an election less than a week away. Katie Beck, NBC News.
And we'll, of course, stay on that election for you. Coming up, a candid conversation about mental health in the Latino community.
Felt like I was standing in the middle of the busiest street in the world, but nobody could see me.
Look at how the pandemic has taken a toll and the efforts now to reach out and help. This is Morning News Now. Time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs is with us this morning. Hi, Bertha.
Hi, guys. How are you this morning? So
we may be seeing some price increases when it comes to getting that morning coffee. Starbucks says it's going to be giving workers a raise as restaurants nationwide are struggling to find enough people to serve customers. Coffee chain says workers with at least 2 years of employment history could get up to a 5% raise. Those with at least 5 years in, they could get a 10% pay hike starting in late January. The average pay for all workers will range between $15 and $23 an hour by next summer. And they're also offering referral bonuses of $200 if you can find them someone to fill shifts. Meantime, Stellantis, the parent company of Fiat Chrysler, is launching a rewards program. It's available to owners of Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, and Ram vehicles through a free app. So you'd get 2 points for every mile you drive, but on top of that, to encourage physical activity, they'll give you 5 to 10 points per mile if you ride a bike or take a walk. Stellantis says they've partnered with more than 250 retailers to offer discounts or gift cards. You could also donate those points to charity. Meantime, MasterCard launching a new card for people who are blind or visually impaired. The card, which will be available next year, has physical notches to help people determine the right way to insert them into scanning machines. The debit card will have a square-like notch, the credit card a round notch, and the prepaid card a triangular one. MasterCard says it decided against using Braille because research found that many people who are blind actually don't use Braille, which was news to me, although I would imagine not having to read, just feeling that notch would be faster to pull out your card.
Yeah, seems like a good idea.
Yeah, that's great. That was news to me also, but so great that they're accommodating that.
All right. Thank you, Bertha.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Now, we're continuing to take a closer look at the growing mental health crisis here in the U.S. The CDC released new data showing Latinos are suffering from depression at a rate higher than any other ethnic or racial group, and they're getting very little support. NBC News Now anchor Morgan Radford spoke to one family about their journey to find treatment.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. Raquel Gabin is a beacon of light for her after-school students.
Okay, what did you guys learn today?
One that she wishes she had.
I felt nobody understood. I felt like I was standing in the middle of the busiest street in the world, but nobody could see me.
Just 4 years ago, Raquel attempted to take her own life.
What happened that day?
I'd already been struggling for about a year or so with depression deeply. And when the opportunity showed up, I took it. In that moment, it made me think, what had I done?
And she's not alone. A CDC survey found that Latinos in the U.S. reported having suicidal thoughts at a rate 4 times that of non-Hispanic whites, and a higher rate of depression than any other racial or ethnic group.
Has the pandemic made things worse?
Definitely.
Raquel's mother, Joselyn Castaños, says finding treatment has been hard.
Do you think there are barriers for Latinos who need or are seeking mental health help?
Oh, there are so many. It starts with culture. We need language. We need people who have the required language skills to help our people.
A gap health experts have noticed. Just 5% of U.S. psychologists are Hispanic, despite the fact that Latinos make up more than 18% of the U.S. population.
Have you seen a demand for mental health services increase among Latinos since the pandemic?
I think so. Dr. Carmen Lopez Arbizu is a pediatric psychiatrist who's working hard to change that.
Why do you think the Latino community has been hit so hard during this pandemic?
I think besides access, it has been also stress on work. The workloads have not changed. Many of our Latino community continue to work because they have sometimes jobs that are essential.
Mental health became important to me when my daughter tried to take her life.
Which is why now Raquel and her mother are speaking out, advocating for more resources.
I'm Morgan. Yeah, you guys can see
While Raquel works as a school teaching assistant, letting all kids know they are never alone.
How does it feel to have someone you can talk to at school?
It feels nice. It's like I can stop hiding my feelings.
And then do you feel better after you get to have those discussions and talk a little bit?
Yeah, even if I'm happy, I feel even more better.
Really?
Helping others take one day at a time. Morgan Radford, NBC News, Hanover, Maryland.
Our thanks to Morgan for that report. Now, the nonprofit Crisis Text Line just announced this month that it will provide free professional crisis counseling via text in Spanish. Here in the U.S., you can text Ayuda to 741-741 for help, or as always, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK for help in English.
Coming up, the Olympic countdown has begun again.
Yeah. We're 99 days to the Winter Games in Beijing, and the preparations are already underway. We'll take you there for behind-the-scenes look next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Now, the Summer Olympics may have ended just 81 days ago, to be exact, but we're already counting down to the next games, if you can believe that.
The 2022 Winter Games in Beijing, China, will get underway in exactly 99 days. We're very good at math here. On February 4th, you can catch all the action on NBC Universal's platforms, and right now, NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer has a preview.
Joe and Savannah, the countdown is on to the Winter Olympics. The opening ceremony to be held in this building that probably looks familiar. It's the Bird's Nest. It's one of the facilities built in 2008 for the Summer Games that will be repurposed for these Winter Games. What will be different this time, of course, very strict COVID protocols. They've taken a lot of pages from the Tokyo playbook. We know how difficult it is to pull off an Olympics during a pandemic, and China will be taking those COVID restrictions to next level. They'll implement something they call a closed loop system. What it means is that thousands of officials and athletes, when they come to China, they'll go directly into an Olympics bubble. And there they will have daily testing, mandatory masks, no interaction with the outside world. They will compete, train, eat, sleep, and do everything within that bubble. That's if they're vaccinated. If they're not vaccinated, they need to do 21 days isolated quarantine. It's a period longer than the actual Olympics, but that's in keeping with the policy because China is a zero COVID country. And what that means is that without hesitation, authorities will impose travel restrictions, mandatory quarantines, even lock down entire cities in order to contain outbreaks. And we're not talking thousands or even hundreds of cases to trigger that. Often it's only a handful. Organizers say they want to have a safe games, and in order to do that, they need to follow these strict rules, and anyone who's seen as violating or breaking them faces the risk of expulsion. COVID, of course, is not the only obstacle facing organizers. In the background, there are still calls for a boycott from rights groups and some U.S. lawmakers critical of China's human rights record and policies in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong. The IOC says the Olympics needs to be respected as politically neutral ground. For the athletes, their sole focus will remain on winning medals. Every Olympics is different, and this will certainly be a new experience for the teams coming here. Spectators will be allowed. There just won't be international fans. The events are going to be open only to people who live here. China has invested heavily to try to boost enthusiasm over the last few years for winter sports. They made the promise officially that there would be 300 million winter sports fans by the time the Olympics open. Organizers say they only want games that are simple and safe, but they are adamant that the games will go ahead. Joe, Savannah.
All right, looking forward to it. Janice, thank you so much.
Yeah, some exciting stuff.
All right, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.